Hello, Dana.
Hi, Charindra.
Hello, Sathya.
Hi.
Is it are you doing some dramatical thing or?
Yeah, I'm being extra dramatic today with the voice. No, unfortunately, I'm a little under the weather, but batting on, as they say.
Thank you. You have taken it so seriously that we have to somehow appear to host this
Appear to
podcast.
host, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Today we have extra depth in our conversation.
Good one.
Lots to talk about, but I want to start on this interesting debate that's going on about the budget and generally one of the most notable things that happened in the budget was the salary increase or the wage increase that was given to the estate workers. Not necessarily the wage increase, but how the wages are going to be increased. So they have proposed a 200 rupee increase from the RPCs, the regional plantation companies, and another 200 as a daily attendance incentive, right? Or allowance from the government. Firstly, and either of you can take this, tell me why it's so important, or is it important for the salaries to be increased of the estate workers?
Yeah, so Chari, I think first of all, I hope no one will just cut a small clip of it and use it, do a spin, because there are a lot of sensitive issues that we are going to talk on this topic. First of all, we really do not want to see anyone living below the poverty line and having, a miserable life. That's number one. So we all ideally has to have a salary that which is livable, and this has been coming for a long time. So definitely we are on that side. So that's number one. Number two is also to do that, whether who should give that. Who should support that? And taxpayers anyway have a mechanism to support. For an example, Astra-Suma, it's not only the plantation workers have a separate thing of at the same time. Across the country, there are many people who live below the poverty line, not even earning probably 1,500, 1,300, even as per the World Bank study. So there's a mechanism called social safety net where it basically covers up. That's one side of it. And then the other side comes, okay, on the plantation sector, while some of these plantation companies are making like massive profits, whether is it reasonable to, in a way, supplement their payroll? Because in a way, by asking them to also increase by 200, but also giving an additional 200, I think it's debatable. I'm afraid that we will have a right or wrong answer here, because I feel it's a proactive measure by the president or like the finance ministry that he has taken a move. Whether it's the right or wrong, we don't know. But now everyone else has to react, sort of a thing, is my observation. Because now he has said, okay, we are going to give 200 rupees. Of course, it's debatable, okay, whether you are going to give it to the private sector who are already profitable, but also there's the other side, you really do want to uplift the living standard of these people who are in miserable conditions. So I don't see there's win or lose for any side, but we understand both sides. But I think the main arguments are whether the taxpayer should pay that. On economic principle, ideally the company's profits should not be supplemented by the taxpayer money. If it's helping the profitability of the companies, it should not. It is beyond against the principle.
You don't want to inflate profits.
The
government shouldn't get involved in subsidizing profits.
Absolutely.
Essentially.
But again, does it mean that the government should has no role on, or like rather than the government, the taxpayers, those who at least do fairly well, definitely there has to be a social safety net that should uplift the people who are below the pretty much in miserable living conditions, plantation sector as well as across the country. So in that sense, actually the taxpayers, we are for a strong social safety net. The economic policy should focus on that.
But Dana, the question is, this is the one industry where the government has to ensure that the workers fall above the poverty line, have a social safety net, and that kind of thing, an organized industry.
Yeah.
Because agriculture is not
Yeah.
an organized industry. So isn't that the problem that people are having, that this is supposed to be, since the privatization of these estates in the early 90s, the estates were supposed to become independent.
Yeah. So on there, I would like to provide few clarity. Again, this is not taking any side. Now, on what has happened was, as you recall, first it was during 70s it was nationalized, and then this is a management contract with the RPCs, regional plantation companies. So management contract is actually the state is owned, the land is owned by the state, the management contract, and there's a challenge because these lease agreements are expected to expire in 2045, or most of these regional plantation companies. So there's a productivity argument that if you want to increase the productivity of plucking or productivity of the tea cultivation, you have to have new replanting that needs to take place. But the replanting takes probably about 6-7 years, because first replanting itself is a massive capex. You have to remove the plants, you have to plant, you have to replant, and it takes about 6-7 years to grow the plant and come to a level that you can pluck teas. So that will take about good 10-12 years. So I think the plantation companies are reluctant to make that investment because they don't know whether their agreements will get extended or not in 2045. At the same time, our pluckers on the other side, I think I really cannot recall the exact number of pluckings that they need to do for a week, but it's under capacity. So whether this argument is whether it has to be productive based or whether it's attendance based is a debate. My view is ideally it should be productive based, not because of anything else. Look at the same smallholder companies, because even in the tea sector, there are regional plantation companies, but the majority comes from the smallholding companies. For their average labor cost is lower because smallholding, it's about, I think, less than 5 acres per person.
But it forms the bulk of the production in Sri Lanka.
Absolutely.
So I think 60% plus, if I remember correctly, are from smallholders.
Absolutely, smallholders. And also look at the processing. Now the regional plantation companies have their own tea factories. They only process their tea. But the smallholder guys, of course, they don't own a tea factory, no. So they have their cooperatives, they have their Tea Shakti program, which also in a way the government has funded many years ago, and they basically process anyone's tea. So there have been productivity angle which has come on the smallholder angle, while the economic theory sometimes when you have economies of scale, when you have like bigger plantations, there is argument for that, but the smallholders have found it in a way how to do it productively because they want to really sustain. And at the same time, their average labor cost is comparatively lower than the regional plantation companies. So my view is ideally it has to be more productivity engaged, not because of anything else. Because ideally, Chari, now for an example, for a tea plucker, what we have to look at is he or she is daily take home, no monthly take home. So if it's a flexible working environment, like they, let's say, do plucking for like, if they do the plucking, let's say the 20 kilograms, the target, or like the 30 kilograms, let's say in, I don't know the exact conditions, like in 6 hours or 7 hours. So regardless of that daily attendance thing, if they can actually commit to that output, and if they have other part-time work opportunities, it could be on tourism, it could be on anything. So then you basically uplift the living standard of that community, because ultimately you take care of what they earn at the end of the day. But connecting it to a daily, attendance bonus, because, then you have to come to all 25 days to work. And the plantation companies may also jigging with the system because they do the scheduling. They can only work for 17 days or 21 days. So they may not be eligible for that, actually for that, monthly.
And the plantation companies have been asking for a productivity linked one for a long time. I think if I remember correctly, at least 8 years or so, they have been asking for a productivity linked system. Who is blocking that, Dana? And Sathya, you can come in here as well.
It's obvious there's a lot of politics, because since there's a voter block there.
Yeah, so that's the with the comparison between the smallholders and the RPCs. Another thing is that the labor power because the labor is so unionized with the RPCs and less so with the smallholders, the RPC workforce, labor force gets to demand more, and also they have the political capital behind them as well.
Absolutely.
Right? In the estate sector, in the high grown areas. On that point, Sathya, what is exactly the problem that the plantation workers are facing? If you can, because I know you've done some work on this, what is their life like?
Yeah, I think before getting to this question on what exactly their life is, I'll kind of touch on what exactly the budget also did and what I kind of my view on it. And I kind of agree with some of the things that Dana kind of highlighted as well. So I think there's a lot of question in terms of the role that the government play in private sector management, right? So, I mean, it's publicly available. These companies are making massive profits. And I think Arutha also recently came up with a policy report where they have published the profits that these companies are making. So if you're actually making this amount of profit, then there's this question of why are you passing the burden of fair compensation into the pockets of the general public? Is it really the general public's responsibility to ensure that the workers of these companies are paid a wage with which they can live with dignity? I think dignity becomes a very important word in this conversation, in this equation. And the question that you asked me also in terms of what are the living conditions of these people, and I think what we should be empathetic towards, even in terms of policy, and we are talking in terms of the context of this budget, I think the key concern should be that this is a community that has been historically and systematically marginalized in this country. So that brings me to social protection and the need for a robust social protection mechanism in this country that includes this community meaningfully in Sri Lanka's social protection system and programs and the entire mechanism of it. And we'll get into the details of it as we move on with this conversation. But I think in terms of talking about living conditions of these people and policies that are put forward that affect the day-to-day, the realities, the lived experiences of these people, I think we should...
Can we elaborate on that now itself, Sathya? Because I want to set the ground for the next stage of the conversation. Yeah. So a lot of people may know that they are not living in the greatest conditions, but what are the specifics of it and what would be the solution from a social safety net angle?
No, right. So to approach that, I think something we should also understand is the fact that Sri Lanka's social protection mechanism has been plagued by many issues, starting from inclusion, exclusion errors, politicization, and we saw that with Samurdhi since its implementation in 1995 to also its transition to Aswasuma, right? So I mean, we are currently conducting a dipstick study on this to understand the status quo of Sri Lanka's social protection mechanism. And with the people that we are speaking to, without exposing any of their names, what I can say is that yes, there is a lot of satisfaction in terms of how these inclusion and exclusion errors has been tackled in this transition from Samurdhi to Aswasuma, but still there is a long way to go. The point I'm trying to make is the system already has these inefficiencies, already has these errors. But when you talk about these errors and inefficiencies that plague the system in the context of the plantation community, the way that these inefficiencies affect these people, it's not in the way that would affect the rest of the country. It's disproportionate is really the word I'm looking for. So, for example, now in terms of...
Do you mean to say, Sathya, like, the exclusion happens for a specific reason, or whether because of that exclusion, the hit on you is, someone with, let's say, Colombo poverty, poor person versus someone in, estate poverty, whether because of that exclusion error, the impact is different is what you're
I'll
trying to
explain
say.
to you in terms of inclusion. So, these people live in lined rooms, right? So, they don't live in like houses that we do. And that is something that is well known. So, in terms of exclusion and how family units are counted in, there was a lot of question as to how many families actually live in this one lined room. And I think it was only last year or 2023, I might not be getting the year accurately, but there was a Gazette notification that came out, and it's specific. I think this was last year, which specifically highlighted saying that we have to be sensitive towards the issue that there are multiple families living in these line rooms, and each family should be considered a unit. Like, you can't consider all the families living in one line room as one unit. Then there's this question of adequacy. This is what I'm trying to explain, right? Inclusion adequacy is already an issue in the social safety protection mechanism in Sri Lanka as a whole, but the way it impacts the estate community, it's disproportionate because they have been kind of marginalized.
So then the argument that is often brought in by the RPCs, plantation companies, is that you can't compare this with a regular industry because not only are we providing them employment, we are providing them housing, we are providing them healthcare, we are providing them all these other perks that a regular workforce of a regular industry would not have access to through the employer. Now, what is how can you bring that argument into this and address it?
I mean, I do understand the RPCs. There is a certain element of protection that they try to provide towards this community. But once again, I think, Charindra, the question is adequacy of it. Even if you look at housing, the line rooms, what would you feel if the entirety of your life, and something that I've learned through these conversations with certain stakeholders, is that even at the end of like your service period as a plantation worker, your pension or your EPF, ETF of what you have in your bank account would amount to about 1 million rupees. What kind of quality of life can you sustain so you've given so much of your labor throughout your life, right? This is very labor intensive work, right? And then at the end of it, when your kind of physical abilities are also compromised, you're left with 1 million rupees as a safety.
There another argument about, because and I'm playing devil's advocate here, another argument is about productivity itself, that the Sri Lankan estate sector workers' productivity is lower compared to our competitor nations' workforce, right?
Yeah.
So then I'm bringing all these counter arguments in so that you can address them as well while with your base.
Yeah.
So there, Charindra, if I were to add, I think the statistics somewhat backs that, while it may not be very popular, because even if you look at countries like Kenya, this is again, we probably be able to put the link of the report that our colleague Sudaraka did on the tea sector, which was about 2-3 years ago, comparing the entire tea sector, which has a separate discussion paper on the labor front. There he has analyzed the labor cost at the before processing in Sri Lanka. And which is comparatively higher than competing countries like Kenya. So then I think we have to unpack this data right. Now, the cost is lower doesn't mean, because someone may argue, okay, are you arguing that Kenya is paying even lesser than what being paid in Sri Lanka? That's why the labor cost is so cheap? No, because their productivity is high. That means like less number of employees may be plucking the tea or processing it. So as the number is less as number of employees, they may have a better earning, which is as a total is lesser than what we spend in Sri Lanka. So it's important to bring that productivity angle to it. While the word productivity is so, it hasn't really have any sensitivity into it. No, you say improve productivity. There is no sensitivity in that word, right? But you have to unpack that in one sense, because as with Kenya, with I think China, our labor cost, again, don't misunderstand when you say labor cost, it doesn't mean that they are paying a lower rate. Their total bulk of that labor cost is lesser because some of them have machinery work that they plug the tea in a different, probably, I'm not sure about the details, but either they plug more teas or like either they have a different mechanism that they can bring the labor cost down. So that argument is valid. And what our report also indicates is that the average number of pluckings is under capacity. If they pluck more, actually they can make more profits, and even the share can be taken by the pluckers. That's what, to an extent, what happens in the small estate holder, and that's what in our report Sudharaka has used as a way to consider it on a more productivity basis, because by improving productivity, actually the plucker or the employee takes more because he gets a share of that productivity improvement. Now what is happening is there's no productivity improvement, and you are trying to get more from the same size of the pie. So everyone's chunk is getting smaller and smaller, and everyone is unwilling to let go their chunk. As a result, it's like a bottomless pit that everyone is, going down the road. So I think that's the angle that...
Here's what I always think about with this issue, Dana, right, and Sathya. 1992, if I'm not mistaken, is when the agreements were drawn up and signed. So we are talking about 34 years now, almost 33. In those 33 years, one side of the argument is that the RPCs have really not developed these estates enough to the extent that they can't even pay their workers a fair wage. Forget minimum wage, I'm talking fair wage, right? The other side of the coin is the government can still take them back, right? They can appropriate it, no?
Yeah.
If all these RPCs are underperforming, because it's not one company that owns them, right? It's different companies. That means there may be a problem beyond one or two bad actors there. Right? Maybe it's a systemic problem. Maybe it's a problem with that industry, maybe the type of crop. If the government takes it over, what is the guarantee that we have that the workers, will get a better wage, that the industry will develop and all of that? So I don't necessarily have an answer to this question, but it's something I've always pondered. Why does no government take that step?
Correct.
Is it because they know that they can't do it themselves?
Yeah, no, I have a view on this study, because now I think some blame has also be taken by the regional plantation companies, because as you said, like 25 companies, what have you been doing? That's a reasonable question. But this is also a good lesson, keeping that all sensitivities aside, how the incentive structure actually could make or break an industry. Because remember, these 502, if I remember right, these plantations were under the private sector before the government you call the word is expropriation, right?
Yeah, government,
Taking it over. Right? And then actually government had to make a decision in 1992, because after it was taken to the government sector, this Janata, cannot recall the exact term.
JVDS,
and the State Plantation Corporation, it was massively loss making. And they had no choice other than again giving it to the private sector. But then the politics came into play, because they realized, okay, if we again give it back to the private sector in 1970, this is going to play bad on politics. So what they did was, instead of that, they outsourced the management with a lease agreement.
In
92.
Yeah.
So now there's a chicken and egg situation. As I mentioned, on improving productivity, plantation companies really haven't reinvested their profits on replanting and improving the productivity. So you have tea bushes, which is like coming from James Taylor's
about
time.
replanting, because you brought it up again, you said that it takes about 6 to 7 years.
Yeah.
I'll take your word on that, right? If it takes 6 to 7 years, they have had 30 plus years to start that process.
Absolutely.
So if it's expiring by 45, in 1925 you can say, okay, 6 to 7 years, 32, I'm going to reap what I sowed only for 10, 12 years. What's the point? in 2000, you can't say that,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So why
No,
haven't they done that?
100%. That's what I'm saying. They should also take the blame because they were at that point. They want to maximize the profit, and there is nothing wrong with maximizing the profit. But they really didn't see the future. They basically try to milk the cow as much as possible, and they basically didn't think of the future of replanting and improving productivity. They kept because our private sector is also, Chari, they are also anti-competitive. No, most of the time they are also, not everyone,
Yeah,
but
they're
most of-
oligopolistic,
they are
yeah.
oligopolists. They are also rent seekers. So in this case, I think they could have thought it like about. I mean, we are too late, and now we are at the edge of it on the extension. So that's what I'm saying. Even let's say giving the doubt to the private sector, the regional plantation companies. Okay, let's say the government extend the lease from, let's say, to 2045 to 2075. What is the assurance that you can say that they will replant again?
Yeah.
Because that's why it's important that you go with some productivity linked incentive scheme if you are actually going to incentivize. Having said the same thing on the plantation workers side, I think they should be
Before that. And okay, so now is this a failure of privatization or no?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think this is a failure of government trying to.
You had to ask that
I want
question.
to-
No, I'm glad that you asked that question because first, Chari, it was this happened because they first expropriated the estates, and then they realized this is not profitable and they cannot run it. And then instead of politics, rather than giving it completely back with the land, they basically only gave it the management contract. Now you cannot do anything with the land on one side, and these plantation companies also have the other plantations like rubber and all that additionally to tea. And that's why I'm saying this is about, if I remember, I don't hold me to this, I really cannot recall, it's in the report. This is the regional plantation companies contributes for about 20-30%. The majority comes from smallholder, which is very productive. I mean, there are issues in the sector, but they are productive. And I am coming from Dhananath, which is the low grown area. And some of our family members are involved, and they try to, because they have the ownership, they concern, which
So you're saying it comes down to land and the model,
absolutely.
right? So this is half-baked privatization.
This is not even half-baked. This is like a mistake of state trying to do business and try to recorrect it in a politically, popular way. And now you have completely messed up everything. This is completely beyond economics.
This does not go against the argument of privatization.
Absolutely, because you look at what they have done in the first place, and then you have I won't even call half-baked. But however, because you have to look at the entire value chain, as I said, like how the tea factories operate, all that. But that's one side of the story. I'm not ignoring the estate workers. I'm 100% on their side that they have to be taken care by the social safety net, because I think the poverty numbers, when the Learn Asia did that study, during the crisis, urban poverty went up by 3 times.
Yeah.
Rural poverty went up by 2 times. Estate poverty went up by 1.5 times. Estate poverty only went up by 1.5%, not because the hit on the poverty was lesser.
Yeah.
It's because they were already...
Base effect. Yeah.
There's a base effect.
Yeah.
So they have to be taken care. And I think, I remember some politicians also said, like, what our standard model was, you give them like a line room, or like you try to build houses for these estate workers. That doesn't work. What you need is, I think Sathya used the right word, you have to the economic freedom has to be dignified. No, they should be given the freedom to build the house that what they would like to, with fits their needs and wants. And that's where we should be aspired, and that's why the problem is so macro. While it's easy to say you give 1,700, 2,000, why cannot you make it 2,500? While it's easy, that won't solve the problem. Because, for an example, if you increase it, now we have to look at also on the global competitive angle, because whatever tea is, whether it's productive on a global scale. Because now by taking, by the taxpayer footing the bill, it's like an export subsidy, We are basically subsidizing exports in a way. So while you are saying you have to improve export revenue, you're on the other side, you are subsidizing exports. So you have to look at the macro picture. It's easy to take one side, but in the economy, you have to look at the overall side, which sometimes it's complicated to even to digest or dissect in a podcast like this because the details are so granular.
Yeah. Sathya, before we
you have
wind up,
anything to add on the...
you want to have the final word on this topic before we
when
move
this
on?
conversation was kind of unfolding, I was also thinking the context in which all of what Dana was saying takes place, right? The benefits attached to each stakeholder makes this even more complex, right? The way you unpack it, the different nuances to it. I mean, I definitely don't want to get into the granular details of it for obvious reasons, but the
What are the obvious reasons? Okay.
But I think each stakeholder has a lot of, when it comes to political capital and what it means in terms of these entirety, this question on wage being politicized. And you know it better than I do, and I think the viewers would also understand what I'm trying to kind of articulate here. But I think the nuances to it is so complex that we have to understand that is the context in which we are speaking about all of these different models and, all of that. So unpacking it really requires you to look at it from a multi-dimensional level is what I feel. And this conversation was unfolding.
But I think, not a personal story. When this Aswasuma thing happened, there were multiple roundtable discussions by multiple organizations, and there were representation from the state sector actually. They brought out these issues of this exclusion. Because in this evaluation, how they being identified, whether they will be eligible for this Aswasuma has been quite complicated. And I think most of them were basically not included in that Aswasuma program, given they were below the poverty line. And I remember the civil society organizations and the stakeholders of these groups actually came and brought this issue, because how you have calculated there's about 22 data fields, and how you really evaluate Sathya's argument about in a one line room, like how multiple families live and how you basically include, exclude, all that is a real challenge. So that has to be fixed. And also, Chari, for an example, why it's important to have this proper social safety net is also on the frequency. Now, for example, Sathya and I had a pre-chat on this. Now, if you pay at the end of the month, I don't think this is going to work. Because for estate workers, given their education level, given their economic literacy, at least it has to be weekly or bi-weekly. Because you cannot really run a cash flow by getting that Aswasuma in the end of the month, and you cannot run it till the end of the next month. So you have to have increased the frequency,
but the amount remains the same.
So you basically...
So aren't you making allowances for the fact that their financial management is weak then?
No, definitely. So that has to be fixed. But even, Chari, even like in US, and I haven't studied anywhere outside Sri Lanka, but even they pay on a 2 weeks time, because it's easier on your cash flow. Because when you are, when you have a shoestring budget, you basically need cash regularly, and especially when they don't have an additional source of income. So I think we have to consider all that aspects, and if you fix this, that's why the digitization is important on one side. That's a separate conversation. But when you have that, actually you can do those targeting. For an example, if estate worker, if they have a child who is basically sitting for O-levels, A-levels, whether there's an additional cash endorsement can be given during that month or during that period. All those things can be taken into consideration when you have a proper social safety net. So that's where I think my view is, maybe Sathya and I may have a slightly different view on this. That's where the social safety net definitely has to be strengthened, and this sort of an issue has to be taken more on a social safety angle, because otherwise the problem will come in the next phase. People in Colombo may say, why only the estate workers? Why not us? Give us also some level of,
so
safety.
Now that could actually happen with this VAT threshold being lowered, right? Or is that likely to happen? If the small Kade Mudalali now has to start paying VAT, how is that going to impact the larger economy, and could that actually increase now our poverty? The famous stat is it has gone from 12% or 13% to 24-25%, right? Is that going to increase even further?
So again, Chari, some might think I'm giving like a politically right answer, but there are two sides for it. I'm just wanting to bring two sides.
That's why we have you here, to give both sides.
Because when we interview Dr. Roger Douglas, who was the former finance minister of New Zealand. Actually, all Sri Lankans are, dreaming to go to New Zealand and establish their own. So he was the one guy who did the reforms to make New Zealand what is today. What he said was, I imposed GST on everything. This is not popular, but he said, I brought down the other taxes down.
Okay.
Reason, I think everyone agrees that VAT or the GST is a reasonable tax than the other taxes, because you tax only on the value addition. But when in the Sri Lankan context, when you try to do it, there'll be winner. I mean, for an example, small and medium companies. We discussed this last week. I think even a small, eatery will, the Rahimas will have to pay VAT, and you have to, pay VAT for the biryani that you eat. So that will have an impact on your consumption cost, because the prices may go up by 18%.
But they are going to pass it on. No, they are not
going to pass it on.
No.
Absolutely. So they are going to pass it on. So the prices may go up, and the implementation or the so how are you going to really capture all of them is another question mark. So I think what the government is trying to do, from what I gathered, was that their digitization, their APIs, this e-invoicing system, this RAMIS 3.0, everything connects. So actually you can easily capture when someone goes above the VAT threshold with 36 million now. So that's how I see it. But again, impact, prices may go up. But indirect tax ratio will go up.
Is that actually going to lead to a lot of non-invoicing?
That's the other side of it. That's why I think they are going to bring that digitization, where you really cannot leave out, and when you actually pay by the card, and when you have that POS machines, you really can capture your revenue because it automatically can be captured. So that's one side. But again, in my view, personal opinion, I don't see having a VAT across the board and bringing the other taxes down, because ultimately VAT is the value addition, and actually the high spenders pay more VAT. For an example, one who uses a V8 or one who consumes more food in Shangri-La or in a high-end restaurant, they contribute more VAT. But then your other taxes has to be brought down, and at the same time, VAT is charged when the transaction takes place. There has to be a transaction to charge VAT. But the income tax is slightly different. Your tax is being already deducted before the money comes to your hand. So there is no room to take a transactions to take place. It's like a commission on a sale, no, Charit. Like when the sale happens, someone spends, there's a transaction happens, you take a portion of it. But so that's the basis of that. But when the income tax, it's being deducted, but I'm not saying to completely ignore the income tax. You have to pay your fair share of taxes. But having across the board and a level playing field is better rather than having an unlevel playing field, because that can distort the economy, in my view. But again, having said that, it will increase the indirect tax ratio, and it will jack up the prices on some day-to-day stuff that we consume.
And now with inflation, so they're targeting 5% no central bank. These factors, could it actually take it above 5% also? What is your view on that?
So first, Sathya, am I talking?
No, go ahead.
If you have,
you go ahead. I'll chime in.
Yeah. So first, inflation, I think it has to be a ceiling. It's not a target, because inflation is the rate that your money will depreciate. So you cannot target and depreciate the money by 5%. You have to keep it as low as possible. But the challenge is with the new central bank law, which I endorse for the independence of the central.
But just picking up on that, when they say a target, they mean an actual target. They don't mean a ceiling.
No, exactly. They mean an actual target, because if it's lower than that, they have to go and report to the... So that's what that's one problem that I have with the central bank law. While I endorse the independence of the central bank, when you say it's a target, now they're trying to increase the inflation. That means you are losing the value of the money in a way, because if it's below 2%, they have to go and provide a special report. And as we saw on COPEF, it has been constantly questioned why it's below the target. and you're trying
But
to...
if they're going to have a ceiling, Dana, then they will need to have a flow as well.
Absolutely. So their flow is between 2 to 7%. Like they have to target between 2 to, if I remember right, 2 to 7%.
2 to 7%.
2 to 7%, they are going for a target about 5%.
Yeah.
So
right.
I recommend to at least keep it below 2%. Again, don't really hold me to the 2%. If I recall right, it's 2%. Between 2 to 7%. They also cannot go beyond 7%, which is good.
Okay.
But I'm saying is, if it's 2%, don't try to accelerate it to 5%.
You're advocating for 2% instead of 5%.
Yeah, I mean, they have to play within that range of 2% to 7%.
Yeah.
So they are, since it's I think about 1% something, they are going to accelerate it to about above 2%, and they are keeping it as a target as 5%, which is the mid range.
Yeah.
My recommendation is, don't, if it's like less than 5%, don't try to increase it for 5%. Why are you going to depreciate my savings while it is 2%? So that's what I'm saying. Don't make it a target, but you can keep it below a threshold. But it is better that you cannot go again above 7% as well. But if it's 2% or if it's 1%, don't try to accelerate it to 5%. Why are you going to do that? Is my question, but I understand to economic growth and all that, they are trying to accelerate. And this is my personal view. So that's my point, because in the legislation itself, they also cannot keep it below 1%, because every time the central bank governor has to go and make a presentation and give reasons why they could not achieve 2%. So it's a little complication there. But Sathya, you have any views on the VAT and even the social safety net?
No, when you were talking about VAT, I was also thinking how this once again connects to the need for a robust social safety net mechanism in Sri Lanka, because when we talk about tax exemptions on certain products and we say keep taxes consistent across similar products, and when it comes to unaffordability in terms of certain segments of society, once again we are going back to square one, where we say there is definitely a need for a robust social safety net mechanism that meaningfully integrates the most marginalized in the country in a dignified manner.
And again, now, if Chari, as you said, if the inflation goes up, this 200 may not be meaningful.
Yeah.
It has to be, that's why I said it has to be linked. That's why it's better to take it from the social safety net, because then you can peg it with the inflation. So at the moment when the inflation goes up or cost of living goes up, you really need not to, because otherwise this battle will come again, because they can easily wipe out the impact of 200 by increasing inflation. And then after 1 year or 2 years, the same conversation will come, another 200 rupees on this. So this is going to be a never-ending, conversation.
Yeah.
That's why you have to have a separate mechanism on social safety net of taking care of them, which is needed and which has to be dignified, which in my view can be only done through improving productivity on one side. At the same time, I don't see why the taxpayers also should give a cash payout for profit-making companies on the other side.
This inflation target, who wants to hit that inflation target even more than the central bank?
Who?
It's the opposition. Because now they are going to have this rally. They want not to hit that target, they want to exceed that target.
Oh, is it?
Because if the target is exceeded, it makes their narrative much easier.
But before that, what is the sense on politics on this 200? How is your view
So the opposition is saying that the same argument, that one of the arguments that we discussed, the government should not be footing that bill.
Yeah.
That it should be the RPCs who are self-sufficient and able to give that, especially with the margins that they have, the profit margins. The government, I think what they have done is, it's both a political move, and I think you touched on this. Political move is almost daring the MPs like Jeevan Thondaman,
Mr.
Digambaram, Radhakrishnan, all of this, daring these politicians, Mano Ganesh, daring them vote against this budget.
Exactly.
If you can.
Absolutely. And it shows how smart or how the political move works, because even the members of the opposition had to vote for the budget.
And that makes the opposition leader look even weaker than he looks right now. And it also makes the opposition overall look fragmented. So politically, I totally get this move. I think in terms of the practical realities, it's also a solution for the lack of a solution, because clearly they have not been able to convince the RPCs to provide 400 rupees. So they have said, okay, you come halfway, I'll come halfway, we'll meet halfway, and then we'll shake hands and do this somehow, right? Because the longer they don't get this increment, the worse the government looks, and that's a large vote base that the government thinks, because the first one representing that sector that I think came to parliament was Ambika Samuel,
Yeah.
right? So that is from the NPP. So the government has a stake in that sector.
Correct.
And it's entirely conceivable, if they do a good job, that they could get that huge estate sector vote for the first time, broken away from any of the,
Legacy.
long staying MPs from there.
Correct. And also generally the JVP and NPP is like for Badakarna Janata. So I think this also, they are in a way with the ideology, they have to consider this. But it's, yes, sir.
No. Just some statements that have been made recently in terms of, I know it's a bit contradictory to the promises that they make. I mean, they've said it kind of breeds government dependency, welfare, and aspecimus. So in terms of sensitivity and in terms of from a policy perspective, I was wondering whether it's the right way to approach this. Because even when you talk about sectors like the estate community, I think something we should be sensitive towards is the intergenerational transmission of poverty, right? If you look at it from the outset, how much of them really have the opportunity to escape this trap of poverty when you're born into that kind of vulnerable community, right? So there are ways to tackle these through policy, and I think something that we've spoken at Advocata as well is we've looked to Brazil's Bolsa Familia program. Hopefully I'm not butchering the name of the program, but this is...
What is it?
It's the Bolsa Familia program in Brazil.
Right.
It's a conditional cash transfer program, and the gist of it is that it's really linked to human development indicators. So the conditions is that your child's school attendance matters, vaccinations matter, and one of the beneficiaries, actually this was mentioned in a recent World Bank report, if I'm not mistaken, which was written on this program. One of the beneficiaries, she actually says that my child is very sensitive to the fact that this steady income is very dependent on he or she going to school, actually attending school, right? So this is proven to have very meaningful human development outcomes, this program. So I think that is also meaningfully linked to taking these people out of intergenerational poverty, and those are things we should consider when we speak of poverty, its intergenerational aspect to it, especially in terms of these communities. So when you say cash transfers, cash handouts, and even when you say increase their wage, you have to go beyond that and think, is it really going to address poverty, or is it just like a momentum thing, like here, like handing out some money or increasing their wage? Is it really going to address that crucial issue of poverty? Yes, breeding long-term government dependency is something that policy should pay attention to, but it's not not that direct. You have to think about meaningful livelihood development programs. How do you integrate them meaningfully into social protection mechanisms, larger social protection programs? So those are very important elements. So just cash handouts and just increasing wage, I mean, there is a layer that goes beyond that you have to really kind of think about.
Just to add, I think Sathya hits a very valid point. Now, Shari, even the productivity on the estate workers, let's say the productivity, okay, what happened if someone falls sick and if they really cannot hit the productivity target? So I think at the moment, my worry is that we are also sensitive to the issue that they are living quite inhumane conditions, and we are trying to address it directly. While the problem and the solution is somewhat distant, it could be productivity linked or attendance linked. Let's say attendance, someone falls sick and they really cannot attend and they lose the attendance allowance. Even if you think the attendance, if someone thinks the attendance bonus system is right. So what is the mechanism, the fallback option? So that's where you have to look at in a more social safety net angle, which gives them a buffer or an absorption on inflation, on if they fall sick or if they really cannot do. So that's where you have to think on the problem rather than directly thinking, okay, you're making profit, you pay, or like the government, the taxpayer should pay, or on that is an important angle to look at. But probably you have to look at address the solution, address the problem in a more complicated way, which also the problem is it takes time. I mean, imagine they have been excluded in the ASVASMA program. So how are you going to digitize them and get them into the thing and register and all that is a complicated process. But unfortunately, if you want to have a sustainable fix, that's the way forward. My worry is we are only looking at only like a short-term thing. Okay, how are you going to solve it? And likely this problem will come in another 1 year time or 2 years time, because either the inflation has caught up, and then your cost of living has gone up, or there's some issue, the plantation workforce is anyway declining, and you lose the competitiveness on the tea and export market on the other side. We should not forget that while Kenya and everyone is competing, I think from the little that I know, we have a kind of a brand for this, I think, black orthodox tea, which quite unique to Sri Lanka. So you have to keep that competitiveness on one side. So you have to look at all aspects, while if you try to only address one thing, just looking at it, it doesn't serve either the employers nor the employees, is my view.
No, yeah, you're very correct, Anna, when you say, we've been sticking to plaster solutions, and also it's more reactive, right? So even this attention on social protection kind of heightened in 2022. If you really look at it, the social safety net program was something Sri Lanka was set to do under the 2016 IMF extended fund facility, and if it had been implemented that by then, ideally it should have concluded somewhere in 2019, when that program came to an abrupt end.
It was halted.
But it is only during 2000, and I think the Welfare Benefits Board also became fully operational somewhere in July of 2022. So I mean, there's a lot of question as to why it's so reactionary. Like something happens, like economic crisis, COVID-19, then you're suddenly like, oh, people are suffering, people are dying, they don't have anything to eat, what do we do about social protection, how we had, it's so reactionary. I think you have to go beyond that and really think about it in a sustainable manner. And I think we've come to that point where, after experiences in 2022, a lot of positives have come out from this transition from Samudri to ASVASMA. But I think it's a good reminder to Sri Lanka and also governments to come that this whole reactionary policy solutions to crisis, it only leads you to more crisis, in my opinion. So that's something to kind of ponder on as well, is what I feel.
So just to remember that I was at a meeting and discussed about the 7% growth, and even I think President also in the budget speech, he mentioned like some people said this will take about 10 years to recover, but now we have recovered, sort of a thing. But actually I realized on Sathya's point, like how it could disproportionately hit the poorest of the poor, or the state workers, because people think the crisis happened in 2022, which is right, which was a visible crisis. But actually, Chari, coming to that, our growth was somewhat stalled. Like if you look at from 2015, bond scam happened. 16, 17, there was the drought.
And all that,
18, then there was this constitutional. 19, there was Easter attack. 21,
all of this
2021
also impacted the progress of the 2016 EFF as well.
Absolutely. So if you look at that 10 years, actually we are really not gone back to 2018 in terms of our overall GDP, right? So actually that lost decade has happened. But the problem is, a lost decade could be lost 3 decades for the poorest of the poor, because they really did not have any shock absorbers. So then basically they were struggling, and after that time period where they can contribute, because your prime age is about where you can contribute and climb the career ladder is about that 15-20 years. And if you hit that in that crisis period, that 10 years is gone, then basically your life is gone.
No, there's a lot of literature also to prove that the progress you make on human development indicators or the reverse of it is very much dire in terms of, what you're very correct when you highlight that, the impact it has on the most vulnerable, especially in the global south when crisis of this nature happens. So you have good progress in human development indicators, but when this kind of thing happens, the reverse of it is so dire, and the impact it has on the poor is definitely intergenerational. So that's something that, it's a very valid point.
No, I agree with you guys that the crisis didn't necessarily, it manifested in 2022. It didn't actually start in 2022. I think the Yapana government, after coming in during that, especially the post-war so-called boom era, which is mainly about construction and infrastructure, coming out of that, and out of that, for me, artificial growth, right? We had high growth, but really not sustainable and not very meaningful also. That is my problem. Coming out of that, then to go the complete other way, to be so conservative as to focus purely on economic stabilization alone and fiscal consolidation, ignoring growth altogether. So, I mean, we can take this up on another show, and you might have different views on it. But I think the central bank governor, well-meaning in that time, but for me, a bit conservative. And then the government also with all its infighting. So all of that led to, when shocks happen, if you're in bad health, now in this health, if I get pneumonia, then I'm really bad, right? But I could probably survive pneumonia if I was in good health. So it's kind of like that. But yeah, I think we are way out of time. We will take up some of these issues next week, and by next week we will have the opposition rally would have taken place this Friday. So we'll have a lot to talk about on that as well. We can do the review or the post-mortem, depending on how it goes about it.
Absolutely.
We can do that next week. But I'll let you do the plug, and then we can, or Sathya can do the plug.
Then I go ahead and do that plug.
So the one reason why you should become an Advocata Insider is because we discuss these insights and we do real research. For example, Sathya going into detail on the social safety net, because sometimes these ideas has to be around to someone to pick it up and implement and shape the policy discourse. And I think that's what we do. Not only us, there are multiple other think tanks too. I think that everyone complements each other, the work that everyone does. So please become an Advocata Insider. It's just 12,000 rupees a year, just 1,000 rupees a month. So become an Advocata Insider, and also just go through our report on the tea sector. And at the same time, there are multiple other free content that you can watch on our YouTube. And we are also presenting Advocata Plus in Sinhala, Advocata Kural in Tamil, and Advocata Institute is our English channel. So, and also we are, any social media platform, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, you should be able to find us in any form that is convenient for you. So please become an Advocata Insider. That would be big help for the research work that you do, and to bring free content like this for the betterment of the general public in all 3 languages.
You're not going to contribute to the plug at all?
All I can say is stay tuned to Advocata and stay tuned to all of this good work that we do, and also contribute, because we really do need your contributions to continue the meaningful work that we attempt to do.
And subscribe our channel. I think we are getting good feedback. Charindra is hosting this podcast, and I think we are our views are being improved. So good. Thank you very much. So share it with people, and maybe give some comments and give some feedback. Which topics that you would like to discuss, so then we should be able to bring those insights.
All right. Thank you, Sathya. Thank you, Dhana, as always.
Thanks, Charindra.
And we will see each other next week.
All right.